Hi there! Mika is kicking off the new year with a bit of extra generosity, handing out a free Selector for 1 out of 6 SSR dolls and their weapons. The event starts today, and the Selectors are obtained by logging in a total of 5 and 8 times respectively during the event period. Ever since the announcement, the most common question I've been asked is which option is the best choice. The answer isn't entirely straightforward, as it depends on your current roster as well as your upcoming priorities. In this video, I'll try to make the decision easier by discussing investment breakpoints and expansion keys where relevant, and by exploring their future value and lineups. That said, we should acknowledge that GFL2's meta constantly changes through the release of new dolls and expansion keys. The CN server is ahead by about 6 months, and a decision derived from their current tier list and team building has no guarantee of being future-proof. All we can hope to accomplish is a valid choice in light of the next half year. If you're new to the game and would like a more in-depth introduction to each doll's kit, I recommend checking out their dedicated videos first. With that said, let's get into it. To start us off, here's for easy reference the necessary investment for each of the dolls, and if applicable, in parentheses their optimal investment points. The latter is not to be understood as a recommendation, but rather that the doll gains reasonable value until that point. Chances are, if you've been around for a while and have been following the meta advice, you might have all of the characters at their minimum investment, unless you decided to not build their respective team. If you have one at the optimal investment point, you can immediately cross her off the list. For the remaining characters, we need to consider their contribution to their respective mono-elemental team, that team's meta ranking, and their utility in mixed elemental setups. That said, here's Retempest charts from the current Basti patch, suggesting strong mixed elemental lineups on the left and mono elemental lineups on the right, ranked by priority. This is a relevant reference for our decision. As a rule of thumb, mixed elemental setups perform better at lower account investment because they combine the strongest core characters of the elements, preventing free-to-play and low spenders from spreading their resources too thin. Note that there currently is no mono Hydro lineup. There hasn't been a new Hydro character in a long time, and with the currently available options, their damage output would be too low. As you can see on the right, all of the available dolls from the Selector still have a place on their mono-elemental teams. Due to a lack of alternatives, this doesn't necessarily reveal much about their value, but if you were inclined to build a particular team, you wouldn't be wrong choosing that character. However, I'd argue that those who don't make an appearance on the left provide less account value and are more likely to get replaced soon. This applies to half of the dolls from our Selector. Andoris' role is mostly to provide well-timed negative charge application for lever support actions in a mono-electric lineup. If you were interested in building the electric team and decided to pull Andoris on her release, that was a fine choice. However, if you have the electric core of Leva, Lena and Zhengyu but skipped Andoris before, I'd advise against selecting her now. The 3 electric core members can be paired with the Hydro core of Springfield and Tololo, or the physical core of Yoohee and the upcoming Voimastina. As noted before, such mixed compositions allow you to focus your resources better and dupe up a character that is more versatile. Next, Makiatto is the only DPS from the Selector. She is fairly old and was among the first to receive her expansion key, so she struggles to compete with modern damage dealers and should not be a priority. With Orbella and Alva, the freeze team has a bit of a revival, but as you can see from the chart, it's still at the bottom of the pecking order. When mixing elements, Makiatto is likely the first one to be left out unless highly invested. Until a second expansion key changes her value, I'd advise against selecting her. That said, if for some reason you happen to have her at V0 and all other dolls from the Selector at their required investment level, you could save the Selector to see if her second expansion key improves her standing. Given how long it's been since her first key, I'd expect the second one soon. Then, until this patch, Mechty was a solid choice for the Corrosion team to apply weakness and provide damage amplification. Since the release of her expansion key, her kit has become extremely streamlined and there's no more downtime on any of her abilities. She is complete at V0, and if you didn't have her yet, she would have been a good choice. That is until the release of Basti. Surprisingly, she replaces Mechty almost entirely. Like Mechty, she can create corrosion tiles while providing more personal DPS and damage amplification. The only thing Mechty does better than Basti is buffing AoE support attack damage. Since that is quite niche, Basti has now taken over as a core member of the element. If you were to choose Mechty now, you'd be looking at a 6-month expiration date. While Mechty is still great for PvP, I can no longer recommend her without reservations. So aside from very specific considerations, that essentially removes 3 options and leaves us with Springfield, Vector and Yoohee. Since all of them are relevant to this day, your first priority should be to get them to their required investment level. If you've been playing for a while, chances are you have at least both Springfield and Vector at V1. If you skipped Yoohee before, she's an easy choice now. She's a core support for the physical team, which rose to the top of the meta thanks to Voimastina and the more recent Cheyenne. Moreover, Yoohee's expansion key allows her defense penetration buff to function alongside elemental damage. Now, some of the strongest mixed lineups feature Yoohee and one or both of the physical carries, alongside another strong elemental core, for instance of the corrosion or electric elements. Even before the release of the physical powerhouse carries, Yoohee is a great generic support character. She offers healing and debuff cleansing, as well as crit damage, attack and stability damage buffs. She can fulfill that role even at V0, but if you are building her to support the physical carries, you should at least aim for her V1 for the faster ramp up of her death pen buff. Now, what if you are new to the game and have none of the characters? Springfield is a strong beginner choice because she offers unparalleled survivability and pairs well with the standard pool powerhouse Tululu. Unfortunately, Springfield only gains a shared telepathy buff via her V1 upgrade, which is needed to unlock her full synergy with Tululu. If you choose Springfield now, you should commit to pulling her V1 on a rerun. Keep in mind that Springfield is the only character here without an expansion key, so her value is likely to increase in the future once that changes. Then, Yoohee would be a good choice because she is a universally useful support even at V0. Once Voimastina releases, which should be soon, Yoohee will see a lot of use. From these options, she's the safest pick as her value is guaranteed for the foreseeable future. Vector is the most specific character among the three, as her utility is largely limited to burn dolls before her V2. Notably, she forms a strong core with QJ from the standard pool, offering immediate account value. There are multiple upcoming burn dolls, so Vector makes sense if you're interested in building a burn team. Her V1 is not as critical as Springfield's, but you would still want it eventually though. That brings us to the most complicated scenario, in which you have all three of these dolls at their minimum investment level of V1. Which of their next dupes gives you the greatest value? Springfield's V2 makes her ultimate restore an additional confectance point. That allows her to use the ultimate plus her S2 in the first turn, which enables a triple attack from Tululu and one more use of her ultimate in a 7-turn battle. That's convenient and a slight improvement of the total damage output, but without knowing what her expansion key will do, I'd hesitate to recommend going for that upgrade. Sometimes, expansion keys fix these rotational issues, which they did with Centauracia and Vector. So if you want to be extra safe and don't care as much about the other options, it may be prudent to wait with your selection until we know more. Next, Vector's V2 is her optimal investment point because it increases the ultimate's burn damage bonus and adds an attack buff and debuff cleansing. With her expansion key, her ultimate's cooldown gets lowered by 1 with each active attack. This allows her to use the ultimate every other round, granting permanent uptime of its buffs. Assuming you have the V1 Vector, this upgrade would be unlocked via the Selector, granting a significant boost to your burn lineup. That said, Lorelei's signature weapon will overlap with Vector's V2, as the weapon also grants a 15% attack bonus to dolls who gain burn buffs. These attack buffs don't stack, and Lorelei will be a core burn member even before Vector. Moreover, debuff cleansing may become less mandatory for upcoming Gunsmoke bosses, so Vector's V2 could lose even more of its value. While perhaps the strongest choice now, it may not be the best choice long term. Lastly, Yoohee's V2 is mostly a stepping stone to her V3. It really only offers more debuff cleansing. The defense reduction was useful on the electric team before Jangyo's rework, but now there's no common lineup that needs Yoohee to bring defense shred. Voimastina has a debuff in her own kit, so you wouldn't have to rely on Yoohee's V2 for that. Note that the expansion of the selection range doesn't make her skills AoE abilities, but simply allows the selection of a doll anywhere on the field. That said, Yoohee's V3 is quite worth it, as it lowers the ultimate's cooldown for every activation of Best Dancer. With her expansion key and this upgrade, you get to use the ultimate at the start of battle and on turn 3 again, granting constant uptime of her buffs for 4 rounds. Due to her S2's cooldown, you're not exactly gaining permanent uptime of the ultimate's buffs, but the downtime is quite minor at this point. For her universal support role, Yoohee's V3 is her optimal stopping point. I'd encourage the selection of Yoohee if you're willing to go to V3 on her rerun. Meta-wise, she's currently the safest investment. Next, let us briefly discuss the weapon options. Among the 3 dolls that are the priority, Springfield has the best signature weapon. It grants a generic 15% attack bonus to healed allies, making it an extremely good choice when running Springfield in mixed elemental compositions. This is an important consideration because Hydro dolls like Tululu, Nikita and even Florence have the attack buff in their kits. That said, the buff is becoming more common in the future, as Lorelei and Basti both provide it to their teams. Yoohee also has good uptime once she reaches V3, so Springfield's weapon may lose some value depending on your account's roster. If you have Springfield's weapon already or don't want to pick it due to these considerations, Yoohee's weapon would be the next best option. It provides 10% defense penetration for the team's active physical attacks. This is crucial if you're aiming to reach the 400% defense pen threshold for Valmastina's ultimate, but frankly for most players that shouldn't be a major concern. Outside of Gunsmoke, you're going to obliterate the opponents, whether they reach that number or not. Vector's weapon is an okay choice. It grants allies up to 20% bonus damage when dealing burn damage and 5% extra for support attacks. Since most damage dealers have plenty of damage buffs, these bonuses usually see considerable diminishing returns. In practice, you'll likely see an effective damage boost of around half of what is promised by the weapon's description. If you happen to have both Springfield's and Yoohee's weapons, it would be your next best option though. Assuming you have all three of these signature weapons already, you may consider picking Makiatto's weapon instead. Due to its high base attack and the unconditional 10% defense penetration from its trait, it has proven to be a strong option for other snipers as well. Notably, it is a great choice for Nikita and also viable for Jaehyun. The Samu Sec from the standard pool is a decent enough weapon though, so I would not make Bittersweet Caramel a priority over the aforementioned options. Finally, if you already own all of the discussed options, you're left with Andoris' and Mechty's weapons. Both of them provide a measly 10% elemental damage bonus for their teams. You could pick Andoris' weapon even if you don't own her, since Jiangyu can make use of it too, assuming you don't have her own signature weapon. Mechty's weapon would be the lowest priority, as the 10% bonus effectively amounts to only about 3% for Kluke due to her plethora of damage buffs, not to mention that Mechty has a known expiration date. In conclusion, this admittedly turned into a fairly elaborate Yoohee glaze. Assuming you're meeting the minimum investment level for all options, I believe she is the strongest overall pick, both as a universal support and as a future partner for Valmastina. The main exception is if Yoohee is already at her optimal breakpoint of V3. In that case, Springfield becomes the next best choice in terms of universal value. If your Springfield is already at V1 and you want to play it safe, I'd recommend waiting for news on her expansion key. The Hydro element is clearly overdue for some attention, and I fully expect her to remain relevant once that happens. Vector's V2 offers the highest short-term value, assuming her expansion key releases in the near future. That said, I would strongly advise waiting for the next patch announcement before committing. If her key is delayed too long, the appeal of her V2 diminishes significantly. That brings us to the end of this video. Let me know what you ended up choosing. As for me, I've skipped Andoris and I already own everyone else at their minimum investment level. So yes, I'll be picking Yoohee and grabbing her V3 on a rerun. I only have Springfield's signature weapon, which once again makes Yoohee's weapon the best choice. At this point, there's clearly a pattern. In any case, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.